Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm your host, Sydney Ross, and we have a wonderful Lunch and Learn episode for you today. Before we begin, I just have a couple of notes. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Johnson County Park and Recreation District, for sponsoring today's episode, and big appreciation to viewers and donors like you. You're the ones who make this possible. If you all are interested in joining a free native landscape chat, I host these every first Friday at the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center. It's the perfect opportunity to take a leisurely stroll among the gardens and bring your gardening questions. You can join me this Friday at 1 p.m. at the Discovery Center in Kansas City. No registration required. Just show up at 1 o'clock and I'll see you there. We have our final two habitat garden tours for 2024. Next Saturday, September 14th, we have our Midtown Meandering. This is going to be a very cool program where you can visit 3 different gardens right here in Midtown, Kansas City, and check out the different types of habitats folks have been growing in their own gardens. Habitat havens that inspire to replace turf grass with structures for wildlife and beauty for all. I've had the pleasure to visit 2 of these gardens, and I know that they're just going to be wonderful sources of inspiration for you all. So be sure to check that out on Deep Root's website, deeproots.org/habitat garden tours for more information. If you enjoyed today's program, consider joining us for another in-person opportunity on Saturday, September 21st at Lexington Lake Park. I'll be joined by 2 of my favorite native plant nerds, or actually three native plant experts, 2 of which you will meet in today's program. And we will take a walk among the old growth prairies, young successional woodlands, and check out all the flora and fauna along the way. There are still spots open for 2 sessions, and I will be sure to send you all the information following today's program. This webinar will be recorded, and all the resources will be available to you online following today's show. I make a point to send out an email including all the flora species discussed and relevant resources. When you receive this email, if you wouldn't mind completing the survey at the top of your email, I would greatly appreciate your feedback. And don't forget, put your comments in the chat and any questions for our guest experts in the Q&A. Following today's footage, we will have a live Q&A session with the natural resource technicians of Johnson County Parks Recreation District, where you can ask them your burning questions. Also, please remember to visit us online at deeproots.org for more information on upcoming events, webinars, native gardening resources, and how you can get involved. Also, I forgot to mention during the Q&A today, we will pause for a quick pop quiz. So I hope you all will be paying special attention to today's program because you can win a special set of native plant inspired note cards by local artist Nancy Waugh. These are all prairie inspired species and are just a very cool note card set that I enjoy sending to friends, family, and fans. So stick around for that Q&A at the end. All right, I'd like to go ahead and welcome both Madigan Morrison and Sam Timko to the virtual stage so that we can talk about all things Lexington Lake. Hey y'all, how's it going?
Hello, good. How are you?
Good, so good to see you, Madigan and Sam. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So Madigan is a recent graduate with a degree in environmental science from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. She spent the past summer as a research aide with the Missouri Department of Conservation, studying prairie plants, and now works as a seasonal natural resource technician with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. In her education and work, she's been involved in a variety of field work, including habitat restoration, plant identification and assessment, and prescribed burning. And I think I heard you all did a growing season burn just yesterday to help get a hold on Calorie Pair and all kinds of woody species. Is that correct?
Yes,
That's
we
correct.
did.
We're a little congested from it today.
I bet it's a lot of smoke, especially with those growing season burns. So Sam Timko is also a natural resource technician with Johnson County Park and Recreation District. He specializes in physical science and GIS. After graduating with a bachelor's degree in geology from Kent State University in Ohio in 2017, Sam promptly moved to Wyoming to begin his career at the National Park Service with Grand Teton National Park. During his tenure, he developed his skills in habitat restoration, GIS data management, mapping, and rock and fossil interpretation. Sam joined JCPRD in 2023 and currently manages the natural resource team's GIS data acquisition efforts, including mapping of prescribed fire, invasive plant treatment, prairie planting and reseeding, survey and inventory, and wildlife habitat. Y'all, I am just pleased to have you both joining us today. You both are experts in your own right, and I think we have a lot to learn from both of you today. So thank you so much for joining us, and folks, stick around for the Q&A at the end where you can ask both Madigan and Sam your questions about all things prairie, woodland, geology, insects, and more. So stick around. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I hope you all enjoyed today's Lunch and Learn episode at Lexington Lake Park with Johnson County Parks and Recreation District. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Madigan, and I am a natural resource technician.
My name is Sam Timko, also Natural Resource Technician.
I'm Matt Garrett, Natural Resource Manager for Johnson County Park and Recreation District, and we are standing here at Lexington Lake Park in DeSoto, Kansas today. Slightly under 500 acres. It's a unique park in our system that has an old growth forest, an old growth prairie, lake, and lots of new habitat we put on the ground since 2017.
So we're seeing a lot of mountain mint, Micanum, tenuifolium. It's beyond flower, but when it's in flower, it has these really pretty white flowering clumps that you can see all throughout the prairie. Right now it's going to seed, so hopefully we'll see a lot more next year. This one is Baptisia bracteata.
Oh, look at all the insects.
Yeah.
Cute.
That's so amazing.
Oh my God,
There must be a
wasp
right
nest.
down underneath there.
They're like, hello.
Wow, hi.
Hi, everybody. Are you friendly? Let's not find out.
I don't remember what kind of wasp this is, but I've seen it on prairies before, and they build their nest in the ground, so they tunnel down into the soil.
That's so cool. And even though we just had a ton of wasps come up out of the ground, they didn't attack us. They're just doing their thing. They're not yellow jackets, so.
Here's a still alive Baptisia bracteata, and you can ID this one by the pseudobrax. So usually you see these trifoliate leaves, but with bracteata you have two pseudobrax at the base of the leaflet.
Oh, wow.
To make a star pattern.
Oh, I see that. Very cool.
That one has really pretty white flowers. This rose here is likely Rosa Carolina. It's hard to tell with how few leaflets and branch points it has, but Rosa Carolina usually has 5 to 7 leaflets on the branches, and then it has paired thorns on the branching points.
Nice. Look how big and juicy those rose hips are.
Yeah!
Amazing. So it's cool to know there's not only invasive multiflora rose out there, but there's also true native roses in our prairies.
All right, so Blackberry Management is really complicated in prairies. They're really aggressive, and it takes multiple forms of management to control blackberry. So if you just burn it, it comes back. If you just mow it, it comes back. If you use herbicide heavily in an old growth prairie, you lose a lot of your diversity. So it's like multiple methods in one season, ideally. So if you get a blackberry patch, ideally, any of those root species, we're gonna like brush hog them or burn them and then come back and spray them And we've learned that if you don't get them under control and you're not a little heavy-handed on the front end, they can really aggressively take over a lot of prairie. So we try multiple forms between mowing, burning, and spraying to really get blackberry under control.
And though blackberry is native here, correct?
Some of them are.
Okay.
Most of these aggressive ones are not.
Okay.
And so most of the aggressive blackberries are non-native and require quite a bit of maintenance.
Good to know. I did not know that.
Lexington Lake Park is unique. This lake was formed on the edge of this pasture, which at the time folks didn't realize was probably an old growth prairie when it was formed. And so you've got now this wetland emergent edge with Meads Milkweed, a federally threatened like limestone prairie plant 20 feet away from it. And then you've got, an amorphous species here that loves water. And you've got cattails and American lotus next to prairie blazing star and lead plant. So it's kind of a unique edge to one of our most kind of diverse old growth prairies in our system.
Amazing. And here's the prairie blazing star.
In these areas, they're really prime areas for seed collection with the diversity that we have here. So we'll mark seed in areas like this that are super diverse. They're really prime spots for seed collection. So you'll see marked plants, and that is to help people, once these plants go to seed, find them again when they're a little harder and they're not flowering. And once we collect the seed, we can use them to diversify other areas or to enhance the area that we found the seed in. So in my free time, I'm a land steward with Casey Wildlands at Rocky Point Glade. And so I go up there about once a week and I keep track of the plants through the season and the phenology. We mainly up there have the purple milkweed marked, and we'll be collecting that later this fall. We have several Silphium species in the prairie. This is Silphium integrifolium. And a really fun ecology related to Silphiums is there are weevils that will use them for their life cycles. So when you look at the seed head of a Silphium, you'll see some of them cut off. Not completely, sometimes they'll be falling like this one. And what that is the weevil will partially cut the seed head off so it dies off. It'll lay its eggs inside of the seed head and the larva will mature in there. Once it falls to the ground, the larva will crawl out and continue their life cycle. It's interesting, Silphiums, they have so many seed heads. So this Silphium is still going to be able to flower and go to seed. And the weevils are native, and that's their life cycle. So it's, oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh.
And there's cool grasshoppers that hang out here.
Yes. We're cut from the same cloth, my friend. This is exactly.
Easily distracted.
Easily. That is so cute.
Yeah, so it's not a symbiosis, it's a parasitism, but it does not kill the full plant. So we can see a continuation of this native weevil, and we also see a continuation of the native Silphium.
So this prairie was burned 3 seasons ago, and it's due to be burned this dormant season. And the first time we burned it, it's probably the first time it had been burned in 40 or 50 years, and Meads Milkweed bloomed across the whole site. And we had one of the largest probably blooming populations of Meads Milkweed in Kansas and Missouri when it went off that season. Yeah, it's a fire-dependent prairie species, and it was federally threatened, I think, in 1988. And the more research they've done, it's not a genetic bottleneck, that its lack of blooming, flowering individuals is what's kind of constraining the species. And so I believe you need a population of over 50 blooming individual plants to have a thriving Meads population. And so as much fire as we can put on this landscape appropriately will help the Meads Milkweed. And we're currently growing almost 400 Meads plants out right now with a contract grower, so we can start planting adjacent buffer prairies with more Meads. All right, so we're looking at lead plant, and on an old growth prairie it's pretty common to see, this is one of the only woody species we generally see in a lot of our prairies, and you can generally tell if it's an old growth prairie versus a restoration, as lead plant doesn't really take well in new planted restorations. And so it's a given indicator that you're probably in a beat up old growth prairie, or a nice one if you start to see a bunch of lead plant. and it's highly conservative, and you're not going to find it just anywhere. So it's one of our collection species right now, and it's a very expensive seed. So our seed team is out in the field grabbing a lead plant right now, so we can get it cleaned and get it back out on some of our other high quality prairies. Really deep taproot and just really deep drought resistant plant.
Grasses are so beautiful. They define this ecosystem. They have such a unique photosynthetic pathway. They're wind pollinated, different from a lot of the flowering forbs that we see in the area.
They also provide really good habitat cover for wildlife. I mean, look at that. That was a little...
And dropseed really signifies that we are in an old growth prairie. You don't really see it in restorations, and in a really stable, high quality prairie, prairie dropseed is a dominant grass. And it's not something you're going to see. If you throw a bunch of seed on the ground, dropseed really doesn't take off well in a new prairie restoration. And so when you see this carpet of dropseed, you know you have a really stable old growth prairie that has been here for 1,000 years.
Amazing. And then right here next to it, we got some Rattlesnake Master. Check out. Euringium yuccifolium.
Little stink bug friend.
Oh, look, a little native bee, too.
Oh.
Cute.
Euringium yuccifolium is wild because it's actually in the carrot family.
Say more. Yes, say more.
I don't know much more about it, but yeah, when you see Euringium yuccifolium and you realize that it's in the same family as like Queen Anne's lace, it kind of makes you question a lot of what you know about the world and how this happened.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing. Well, I can speak to the cultural... Oh, look. Was that stink bug always there?
Yeah, well, he was here.
Oh, okay.
He joined the party.
Got lots of friends here. So the leaves of Rattlesnake Master are used to make rope, also known as cordage. And the oldest pair of sandals ever found are in a cave here in Missouri made of Rattlesnake Master. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That is so cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh
So
my God.
this plant, not only is it a really valuable pollinator plant, I love to watch wasps and other bees and insects that pollinate this. Now this one has passed flowering, it's starting to turn to seed. But it is a very, has a lot of benefit for our insects in that way. And it's just a really, really cool plant.
All right, so this is one of kind of the key late summer, fall blooms is blue sage or salvia. And what I like about it is that it has a specific bee, the blue sage bee, that only feeds its young the pollen from blue sage. And so when you talk about the importance of prairie, is we have a bee that depends on this plant. And if you don't have blue sage, you don't have the bee. And so making sure you have thriving populations of this plant is critically important. And this pop of blue on kind of the more blah fall prairie landscape when it's dry and hot out just is a unique, pop of color out on the prairie, and pollinators are all over it.
So cool. Yeah, look at that color. I've also seen hummingbirds nectaring on this, which I thought was very cool. So you can learn a lot based on the shape of a flower, who pollinates it, what time of year it's active. And so these little tubular flowers require fauna with longer tongues to get that nectar reward and pollinate the plant.
And this prairie is kind of beat up. When we discovered it pre-park development, the lower side of the prairie we figured out was very diverse. Lots of wildflowers, including Meads Milkweed. And then as you transition up towards the paved trail and up towards the top of the slope, whatever pasture management was done here in the last 40 or 50 years, it was probably sprayed with herbicide, and you lose a lot of the diversity as you move up the slope. And so there's a gradient, which is kind of funny, to go from top of the hill, very little diversity, into the lake edge, where you have a lot of really interesting plants. Until I'm happy with it, we may do a very serious storm season.
Holy crap! Hi, Mama. Wow, gorgeous. Look at this beauty. This is our native garden spider, you know, Charlotte's Web. Well, meet Charlotte. She is a gorgeous specimen. She's one of our native orb weavers, I believe. See if I can get a focus on this.
And has a cicada in its web.
Does she really? Good job, ma'am. Look at that. Wow. Nature is so cool. Look at that web. This is I believe our largest orb weaver here in Kansas and Missouri. But man, I could stare at her forever. Wow, she's just beautiful. So you see the Rattlesnake Master, you can kind of see how big she is compared to my hand. But she just has gorgeous coloring on her abdomen. Yeah, very cool.
So a couple of the big threats here to the prairie at Lexington Lake Park. We have Sericea lespedeza, which we've talked about in previous videos. And it is a non-native lespedeza that, if you let it go 3 to 5 seasons, begins to take over a lot of our tallgrass prairie landscapes. And since this park is on the edge of a suburban landscape, we have the Calorie Pairs. And so the Calorie or Bradford pears, seed rain comes from the surrounding houses and from development. And so when we run the fire across this landscape, it'll burn this pear back down to the ground. It will not kill it. So we'll have to come back and next season hunt the resprout from this and give it a quick spray with an herbicide. And same with the lespedeza, as we'll have to hunt those plants down with an herbicide. But the Calorie Pairs are becoming a larger and larger problem on our parks and prairies adjacent to suburban development. In the Kansas City region, we have a kind of a Calorie Pair buyback program where multiple cities and county agencies, if you cut a pear down in your yard, we can provide you a free native tree, so look for that coming next spring. It'll be like April 25. And there's lots of resources online on how to deal with these and get them out of your yard and get a native tree that supports an entire ecosystem.
As Matt spoke earlier, this is Sericea lespedeza, one of the most severe invasives we have here in our prairies at JCPRD. I am using Geographic Information Systems, or GIS, to digitally record its location data into our cloud database. So we use this technology to mark invasive plants treatments. We use it to record our prescribed fire areas. We use it for invasive and rare plant survey and inventory. Really, the applications are limitless with GIS. So right now I'm going to make sure this is recorded, and now that our techs have access to this, they can look at our invasive survey and inventory map and come out to this exact location and kill this thing.
Flowering spurge, Latin name Euphoria Corala, is interesting because it actually milks like a milkweed. So if you were to pull off one of these leaves, you would see this white sap coming off. In a milkweed, this sap is functioning as a protective barrier for the plant against insect predation. In Euphorbia, it may have the same ecology. I'm not sure.
Very cool.
And it does eject seeds. So
It's ballistic.
yeah, it is ballistic. So I believe when they're ripe, it actually will project seeds. So we're lucky here at Lexington Lake to catch compass plant blooming a little later in the season. A lot of it's winding down. One of my favorite things about compass plant is the amount of grassland birds that will perch on it. And it's wonderful across the season to see the grassland birds on top of this. Indigenous people use the sap or the resin as gum to chew on, and you can see that this plant has been snapped off, and it looks like the silphium weevils haven't taken it down, so we'll probably be able to get some seed out of that plant this season. And so it's kind of one of those giants on the prairie late summer, incredibly drought resistant. It doesn't care that it's going to be 110 degrees today. Compass plant is a long-lived species. It can be 100 plus years old. And so just because what you see above ground dies back in fire and disturbance, the roots are going to come back and it's going to grow back up. And these plants can be well over 100 years. And even grasses can, we just can't age them. So the context of how old prairie is It's something you really have to dig into. You can't age a grass the same way you can age a tree. So it's wild when you're standing out here thinking about the age of some of these plants. All right, so not all of our Lexington are bad. We have round-headed bush clover here, and it is a phenomenal pollinator species, and it's not to be confused with the invasive Sericea lespedeza, much larger leaflets, and when you look on the underside, they look completely different. This is a wonderful plant to have in a nice stable old growth prairie. And when we're out doing management, you need to make sure staff are trained so that they don't tell you, hey, I killed all of the lespedeza in the field, when we really want to make sure we're getting the invasive, not the couple of native species we have here. And so you have to have even though you're just out managing prairie, you really need to have some good prairie ID skills to make sure that you're not accidentally killing a lookalike native that's very similar to an invasive species. All right, so we are at the entrance of the single track trail system here at Lexington Lake. So the southern third of the park is tall grass prairie with a lake for recreation, and then the northern 2/3 of the park is a large intact forest. And to access the trails, you go through this gate here on the north end of the park, and when this gate is closed, it's going to be too wet to use the system. And so once you enter the system, there's multiple levels of trails. Some of them are green and anybody can use, and some of them have lots of rocks and roots that are we have green trails, blue trails, all the way up to black diamond. So for hiking and mountain biking, the trail system offers all skill and ability level. And one of the neatest things as we walk in here is we're going to see a Kansas limestone fence that is made out of limestone rubble. The state of Kansas made payments to settlers to maintain and build these fences in the pre-1880s. And we know that the Crozier's farm, or the Crozier station that was located on this site, we have the old county ag records for how many cattle they had, how many miles of fence they had, and most of their limestone walls are still intact, chest high for miles through the forest. And so you can only imagine this would have been pasture land and orchards, and the forest grew up over the last 130 years around this area. But as you go through here, and you can kind of see the change in time in the landscape and be able to see these amazing rock walls that go out through the entire system. There's old rubble spring boxes, old rubble foundations, old houses in the woods. They're all off trail, and we ask that you be kind to them. But if you do explore this park in the wintertime, you can find all kinds of really neat, like just little parts of Kansas history are kind of hidden back in the woods at Lexington Lake.
These limestone were most likely sourced locally, and around this area there are two major groups, the Kansas City group and the Lansing group. Those have several members that consist of limestone, sandstone, and shales, all of which were deposited in a primarily warm, shallow sea environment. This limestone is Pennsylvanian in age, so when we're talking geologic deep time here, so that is about, I believe, 323 to 298 million years old. In these rocks you can find lots of fossils of invertebrate marine organisms. Right here you can see a cross section of a crinoid stem, species unknown, and if you look at sort of the cross section of this cutting here, you can see what we would call just general shell hash, which is just jumbled assortment of broken shell fossils.
Wow.
Kansas would have been underwater. This would have been a warm, shallow sea. Most people associate Kansas with the Western Interior Seaway, which was Cretaceous in age and had giant creatures such as mosasaurs swimming through that. This is not that. This is actually probably 100 million years older than mosasaurs. So this is still in the Phanerozoic era, but this is Pennsylvanian as opposed to the Cretaceous mosasaurs.
Okay, so I don't remember what it's called. I can find it out. But that wasp, see the long tail at the end?
It's the ovipositor, right?
Yeah, it drills that tail into wood, into trees, and its larva predates the larva of another wood wasp. So from the outside of the tree, that wasp can smell, I think, the larva that it's looking for, and then it will deposit its own larva to predate it.
Amazing.
Oh my god, I love that wasp.
None of these trails would exist without a community partner that at one time was called Earth Riders. and then they became Urban Trail Co. And so it is a nonprofit that builds handmade trails across the Kansas City area. I think there's almost 200 miles of these trails now. And so when they built out the Lexington Lake trail system, they added a couple stickers on some of the found items out here. But they're amazing partners that spend thousands of hours building these trails. And so this entire trail system was hand-built by volunteers. So to build and maintain sustainable trails means building it so it can like weather the environment, but then coming back and finding spots that need attention and coming back and doing rolling grade dips and reversals and working to make sure water's shed off the trail and not running down the trails, and then rerouting things when they get blown out. And sometimes we get really dry and then have 10-inch rainstorms kind of in our new normal, and you could lose 2 inches off a trail surface in a season and have rocks and roots that weren't there a year ago. And so our trails really kind of change with the weather pretty frequently, and so volunteers and staff spend a lot of time maintaining them. Talking about this last time, but the soil out here is very sandy. This isn't our typical limestone gnar. We'll get to a spot of it further down that it's just a very fine silt because let me get a little more of it, because this is a Kansas river bluff. And so on the back of this forest, if you look over the hillside, we are on the Kansas River floodplain, and we can look out onto the river. And so this is not your common Johnson County clay rock mess. And so it's really neat to be up on a Kansas River bluff.
Yeah, it is.
This type of rock is actually pretty famous in Kansas. This is the Sioux quartzite. It's identifiable by its red features. This is a 2.2 billion year old metamorphic rock. So the source rock was deposited in a braided river system, which then became sandstone, which then, with time, heat, and pressure, metamorphosed into this quartzite. Mm-hmm. So this was deposited here in Kansas from its source in, I think, eastern South Dakota and western Minnesota, maybe even more north. This was brought down by glaciers during the Pleistocene era. So this was transported in pre-Illinoisan times, which is to say that is 2.2 million years to 116,000 years ago.
Wow.
That is the only evidence of glacial activity in this part of Kansas. Any of the more famous glacial eras, such as the Illinoisan and the Wisconsinan, if there is any evidence that they left here, it has been wiped away by erosion. Granite is an igneous rock. It's formed from large bodies of magma that have cooled underground and then exposed through erosion at the surface. Metamorphic rocks are rocks that have been transformed into their current state through the combination of time, pressure, and heat. So, as I said before, this was originally a quartz-heavy sandstone, wow, which is why it's so massive and is so difficult to break, because after the combination of the metamorphic processes, all that is left is basically quartz, so hence the quartzite.
I see. Can we see a little sample of it too?
Sure, you can see this little piece that fell off. You can kind of see the quartz grains in it, just on that fresh break there. It's usually the best way to do grain identification, is get a fresh break face. Mm-hmm. So quartz is the most abundant mineral on Earth, and it's on the Mohs hardness scale, which ranges from 1 with talc, I believe, I'll double check that, to 10 with the diamond. Quartz is a 7, so it's extremely resistant to erosion. Many older rocks are comprised mostly of quartz. As I said before, this rock is 2.2 billion years old. I believe that the oldest fossils that have ever been discovered, which are stromatolite bacterial mats, are 2.5 billion years old. So this rock has been around longer than complex multicellular life.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's wild stuff.
And we're near the tip of glaciation in Johnson County.
The boundary, I believe, is right around here.
Right. So these rocks just kind of make it to Kill Creek Park and Lexington Lake, and you don't really see them south of here very often.
This is probably the extreme edge. If you go more north of here in Kansas, there is fields of these boulders lying around.
Amazing. And yeah, just for a sense of scale, Matt and Matt again, go ahead and stand near the rock next to Sam too, just so we can see how massive it is.
We're not going to move this rock.
Yeah.
That rock ain't going nowhere. But I love how when the trails were being built, they considered having it near this rock as a nice feature for trail users.
Yep.
So.
When we built the park, we knew this rock was here, and so we worked with UTC to make sure the trail went near it so the public could see this really unique part of the park.
Very cool.
All right. How about that? That was a jam-packed episode full of different flora and faunal connections. I'd like to go ahead and welcome back Madigan and Sam to the virtual stage, and we're going to dive into our Q&A. So folks, if you have any questions in our audience about managing invasive species, really anything goes, because we're covering lots of different topics today, prairie, woodlands, geology, and of course, lots of insect appearances too. Feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A. Otherwise, we will go ahead and get started because we do have a couple up here right now. So I will go ahead and direct this question to Sam. This one is from Barbara. Isn't it essential to destroy Sericea lespedeza before it drops seed? What do you know about that, Sam?
Yes, that's exactly correct. The name of the game is to knock these plants down before they can sprout seed and disperse them, thus creating more problems for us. We're actually right about now, we're getting to the point where the lespedeza is starting to go to seed. And since that's the case, we will switch up herbicides and use an herbicide that is more effective at destroying the seed. So any plants that we're hitting here at the end of the season won't have a chance to drop their seed.
Yeah, and can you speak a little bit to the prescribed burns that you're doing right now? I think a lot of our audience is familiar with dormant season burns, but can you talk about the pros and the cons and why you burn at different times of year?
Yeah, so we are doing growing season burns right now. These burns are primarily for invasive controls, so they will knock out Lespedeza, Calorie Pair, other woody species that we don't want encroaching in the prairies. They're less flashy than the dormant season burns because of lack of dead material, but they produce a lot more smoke because we are burning a lot of live stuff in there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And can you also, Madigan, maybe speak to just the different approaches, like the different tools you utilize in prairie management in addition to burns?
Yeah, so what we've already talked about, kind of invasive plant control on a scale where we are targeting specific individuals and spraying with herbicide, is a primary management tool we use in addition to burns. Besides that, those tools are helpful with invasive species control, but if we wanted to increase the diversity on a site, we would do seeding after a burn or seed collection that we can use elsewhere. So those are some of the common management tools that we are using.
Very good. Let's see here. Lisa is asking, for the non-science trained individual, it can be difficult to distinguish the native from non-native. Do either of you have online plant programs that you would recommend to help folks learn how to distinguish native from non-native?
Yeah, so my favorite resource for plant identification is going to be iNaturalist and the app that they make called Seek. There are a lot of other plant identification apps that you can look for, but I know on iNaturalist you can post a plant and have it identified by other people that use the platform. You can also look at a page for a specific plant and it will show you the range, native and non-native range. It'll pull information from other resources like Wikipedia to tell you about the life cycle of it. So that's my favorite that I use. I don't know, Sam, if you use a different resource at all for that.
I'm a little more traditional. There's plenty of field guides out there, like the Forest Service, Kansas Service website has a section on invasive plants. Deep roots, right? Do you guys have resources on that? Just picking up a field guide. When I started this job, I went to Half Price Books and just got like 5 field guides on how to identify grasses in Kansas. So
Nice.
anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, joining other experts or knowledgeable people on walks or hikes, that's a great way to learn. Also, just getting into your own landscape and observing, and as Madigan and Sam mentioned, utilizing different apps, different books, resources. Those are all really great ways to become more familiar with the flora and fauna in your area. I'm going to take a quick pause real quick so we can do our pop quiz before we continue on. So we covered a lot of different species today. I hope you all were paying attention because I'd like for the first person to answer this question correctly is going to receive their own set of native flora note cards by Nancy Waugh. So of all the species discussed today, can you name 2 out of 3 indicator species that tell if you're in a old growth prairie? Let me rephrase that. Can you name 2 out of 3 of the floral indicator species discussed in today's program? Let us know in the chat, and the first person to answer that correctly will receive that set of note cards. Okay, and while we wait for those answers to come in, let's also go ahead. I'm going to answer Val's question here in the Q&A. Val's asking if there's a brochure highlighting the trail features. Matt Garrett put in the chat a document showing the Lexington Lake Park map. So I will include that in the resources following today's program so you all can take a look for yourself. Okay, and let's see if we have correct answers here. Okay, so of the 3 species we were looking for, it looks like Wee Woo, you have gotten it correct first. So prairie dropseed, lead plant, and compass plant. Those were 3 indicators of old growth prairie that we were looking for today's answer. So Wee Woo, I will send you an email and get your address, and we'll send that out to you. Okay, let's continue with our Q&A. Joe is asking, specifically, what herbicides do you recommend to use on Lespedeza? Sam, do you mind taking this question? Because I heard you mention you were talking about different herbicides for different times a year for this plant specifically.
Sure. Primarily throughout the summer season, we will use Remedy Ultra. We run that at about 2 ounces per gallon in our tanks, and that's pretty good for knocking off not just Lespedeza, but other undesirable woody species. And at this time of year, now that Sericea has gone to seed, we have switched up to Escort XP, and that's the herbicide that is a little bit better at chewing through that Sericea seed that it's starting to develop.
And can you speak also to how Lespedeza handles fire? Because I may be off on this because large land management is not my specialty. You all are the experts here for this. But I've heard that it is a little resistant to fire. Is that true? Am I hearing that right?
It's hard to say. We've wiped out fields of Sericea lespedeza with prescribed fire before and come back the next year, and there's even more. So fire will definitely wake up the seed bank of established lespedeza patches. But I mean, it's really just us using a combination of approaches, being the herbicide treatment, prescribed fire. That's kind of the best management strategy that we can throw at it.
That makes sense. Okay, and then Before we head out, I just want to, first of all, thank both of you for joining us today. I really had a great time hiking with y'all at Lexington Lake Park. And folks in our audience, if you would like to join Madigan, Sam, myself, and our friend Madison, who will be joining us for the Lexington Lake hike on Saturday, September 21st. Join us, because as you can tell, we are all very enthusiastic and passionate nerds. I'll say it. I said it. So there's a lot of fun to be had, as you saw. Lots of cool wildlife, cool flora, cool fauna, cool rocks. Sam, I can't wait to learn more from you about the different geology there. So yeah, be sure to join us for that live in-person walk in just a couple weeks. And I will send everybody resources following today's program. And if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and fill out that survey at the top of the email that you'll receive, because your feedback is greatly appreciated. All right, special thanks to both of you, Madigan and Sam. I hope you both have a great rest of your day. Do you have any more prescribed burns coming up this week, or are you all pretty much finished for the time being?
I think
I
we're
don't-
done for the week. We have our crewmates are out on a prescribed burn right now, but we'll see what next week brings.
Absolutely. All right, thank you both so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
And thank you, viewers, for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn episode. I hope you learned just as much as I did, and I hope you enjoyed the program. And I hope to see you out at Lexington Lake here in just a couple weeks. Thank you so much.